Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. This is the podcast dedicated to people who want to speak more as a way to build their income and grow their business. Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. I'm your host, Jane Atkinson. Today we are talking about developing content that will have your buyers leaning in with interest. Of course, the goal is to create more loyal customers and book more speaking engagements. Our title is How to Be a Profitable Thought Leader. And our guest today is Mary Ellen Slayter. Welcome, Mary Ellen.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you here. Now, you are used to being on the other end of this. Talk about that a little bit. I'm very curious to know that you're feeling a little uncomfortable in the hot seat today, maybe.
Yeah. So in my background, actually, I was a journalist for a really long time. So I'm very much accustomed to being the one who asks the questions.
All right. But it's not gonna be like anything political where we'll put you in this hot seat and you're gonna have to answer some very vague question. In fact, your being a journalist at the Washington Post was one of the really intriguing things about your bio, I thought. Tell us a little bit about your time at the Washington Post. What were you covering?
I guess the wonderful fortune of spending most of my 20s working at the Post. And I did a couple of things. The most public facing thing I did is I wrote a career advice column. And I did that for most of the time that I was there. It was a reported column where people would write me with their questions about their careers. And I would tell people my job wasn't that I knew everything about work when I was 22, 23 years old. It was that I knew how to find the person who did know the answer. So I would take those questions, and if I found them interesting, I would go out and I would report them and find the answers and share them, along with my thoughts. That was a small part of my job. The rest of it was spent editing financial news. So I was a business editor.
Oh, okay. So I can't say that sounds like something that I would want to do. Editing financial news. Okay. I like the juicy story, and I don't know how much story there's going to be involved in financial news.
All the big stories. Are you kidding me? I tell people one of the things that the defining moments of my time working there is I was the assistant real estate editor whenever the mortgage industry collapsed. There's nothing juicier. There's really nothing juicier, right?
All right. So. I got you now. I was misunderstanding it to think about, it was numbers and what have you. But no, of course, all the big stories that were going on. All right. Let me give everybody your bio, and then we'll dive into some questions here. Mary Ellen Slayter is the CEO of RepCap and the publisher of Managing Editor magazine, which she launched after working as a journalist at the Washington Post and Smart Brief. She has a master's degree in journalism from the University of Maryland and a BS in, this is interesting, agronomy. I didn't even know how to pronounce it, but I think it's something to do with agriculture, right?
Right. It is. Yeah. It is. It's soil science. It's actually that is soil science.
I know we're going to tap into that knowledge today. Right. From Louisiana State, Mary Ellen serves on the boards of LSMSA Foundation and Mid-City Graz. She lives in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with her husband and 2 daughters and 1 lazy dog. I read that in your bio earlier online. The lazy dog probably is a good conversation starter, right?
Oh yeah, no, and she has her own Facebook page, so she starts her own conversations that have nothing to do with us. Her name is Lucy.
Lucy, I love it. What kind of dog is Lucy?
She's some sort of pit bull mix from a shelter. When my husband brought her into our marriage, he had her for a few years already. She was a rescue dog, and she's a sweetheart.
Nice. Okay, so your expertise is helping people turn their ideas into compelling content and grow their businesses. Talk about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Who's your perfect customer?
Sure. So I run a boutique content marketing agency that, like you said, is focused on thought leadership content, Okay. And it's really about taking your ideas and turning them into content that can help solve your business problems. And that can mean a lot of different things. I mean, I feel like for your listeners, speakers, are used to delivering that message like from a stage, right? But there's also ways that you can use your blog, you can write for LinkedIn, you can put out an email newsletter. But how do you make sure that you deliver an experience that is authentic and engaging? Authentic and engaging is what you do on stage, right, in front of a crowd, as whenever you send them email, right, in that digital format. And we work with a lot of different companies. Like my biggest company, I work with some of the biggest companies in the world, like Aon is one of our clients, right? And I also work with independent speakers, right? I work with, and what I like to tell people is that it really isn't about how big the company is. It's not how big your organization is. It's how big your ideas are. That's what really is the mark of a thought leader.
I love it. And so let's talk about it from a couple of different perspectives. Let's say there's an emerging speaker who's coming out to the market and they're trying to kind of develop their thought leadership platform. And then I also want to make sure that we cover it for my advanced seasoned speakers who've been doing this a long time. Maybe there are some things that can raise their game. So let's start with someone who is brand new and they're really just trying to figure out, what is it that I believe in? Where do you start with people?
So the first thing I do is I have them tell stories. I have them tell me stories because thought leadership, this is a funny thing. People think that this is about like big, ambitious ideas, and to some degree it is, but you can also kind of work your way back into them. I say, tell me your best story, right? Like, what's the story that when you tell this story, like it kills it every time? And usually what I will find, then I'll say, okay, well, tell me your second best story and your third best story. And what you will often find is there's a pattern in those stories that the speaker themselves may not have picked up on before. Okay. But there is a certain idea, there is a worldview, there is a perspective. Their best material, if it's resonating from the stage, is probably also going to be their best material whenever it's in terms of telling stories. And I want them to focus. It isn't about writing about all the things. It's about give me that best thing. Give me that best story.
And one of the pieces of language that we use here at The Wealthy Speaker is about picking a lane. And when we talk about picking a lane, we really talk about it from a topic perspective. So not having, 3, 4, 5 different topics is very helpful in terms of that focus that you just mentioned, don't you think?
Absolutely. Lead positioning is everything when it comes to thought leadership. And in fact, this is one of the ways you can test your lead positioning. There's so much content in the world, and most of it is terrible, and most of it is undifferentiated and mediocre. One of the tricks that I like to do with people sometimes when we first start working together, if they've been producing content, I guess this gets into your little more advanced level.
Okay, that's all right. Good transition.
Okay. Sorry. I'm going to jump up for a second because
that's okay.
The early people can think about this too, but like the advanced people, if you've been writing, if you've been blogging, and you're trying to figure out if what you're doing is truly differentiated and unique, imagine if it were lifted off of your site and your name were removed from it and it were put on your competitor's site. Would anybody be able to tell the difference?
So what you're saying is you have to have your own stamp and footprint on it so that people will recognize your voice eventually. Is that what you
Absolutely.
think? And that's something that you probably learned how to do way back in your newspaper days.
Right. Well, it's what makes it worth reading, right? The New York Times and the Washington Post don't sound exactly the same, right? So you don't want to sound like everybody else either. So the idea is for you to figure out not to copy. And I think this is something that I run into a good bit with emerging thought leaders. So this is a common error, is they like someone else's work, right? They see another speaker that they want to be like, or they see another company whose brand they want to emulate. And so they say, well, that's what they did, so I'm going to copy that. And they go and they say, I'm going to copy that topic, or I'm going to write about these things. And that's really the wrong way to look at it entirely, because that person is already doing that, especially if they're already famous. Okay.
Right.
You are not going to out Gary V. Like that is a,
nope, you're not going to.
No, that path, you talk about picking your lane, because I love that language there too. Or like, what's your part of this ecosystem, right? You've got to find the empty space. You are not trying to copy what has already been done. Find the space that no one else has filled before and fill, and that only you can fill. That's how you produce compelling content.
Do you think it's a process to really find your voice? I've been writing and blogging and doing all this stuff for dozens of years, and I feel like I'm still evolving. I don't know, it's like different people give me permission to be more of myself. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think that if you're not doing that, then you're not growing, right? You're not going to, if you're continue to be a person who's you're going to learn in the world, and that if you're not, your content creation is going to reflect that. Like stagnant people make stagnant content, right?
Right.
People who are still learning, who are growing, they get new stories. I mean, there's a certain level, there's a craft to writing and to speaking. And I'd love to see if you agree with this or not when it's applied to the speaking world. But
Okay.
once you've mastered the mechanics of how to tell a story,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which most people do if you're a professional and you're any good at this within 10 years of your career. After that, what the difference between the good people and the great people is not in their mastery of the craft so much as the quality of the stories that they're collecting. Are they paying attention in the world? Are they open to new ideas? Are they learning? Are they taking in, adjusting, and adapting?
Yeah.
It's not about learning how to write a better sentence at that point, because you know what good sentences are and what they aren't.
Right.
But are you getting good material, basically? Are you an interested person?
Yeah, a curious person. And actually, I think the ding, ding, ding for me comes on the word continuous learning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just being out there and seeking. Sometimes I think, okay, so I've been in my same industry now for 30 years. Maybe you can relate to this from kind of the writer standpoint. And I have been through series of jadedness where I've just been, okay, I just need to stop learning. I need to just stop, like step back a little bit, maybe a little bit tired or burned out from the industry. And I'm not there right now, thankfully. But I think that plugging back in and finding a new voice, somebody who you can learn from, who comes at it from a completely different perspective, is so refreshing and kind of keeps you going and moving forward. I think plugging back in and learning more, sometimes people think, oh, I've already heard everything that is to learn at the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers or the National Speakers Association. You've been when you've been going for 30 years, what more is there? But there's still a lot. There's so much. And I think learning is what allows you to kind of keep thinking about how you take your thought leadership to the next level.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we have a saying that great writers are also great readers, right? So if you have to read what everybody else in your space is doing, but again, not because you want to copy them, but because you want to find like the new thing to add. I think that, and I think that's really important. Don't copy. Please don't copy.
That's funny because I've actually avoided, there's only a couple of people really in my space, but I've avoided reading them because I didn't want to copy. I didn't even want to be tempted to copy. I have a horrible memory and I don't remember 1 year to the next where I got pieces of information. So I just don't read them because I'm too afraid that I'll forget where some idea originated or I'll be too similar. I know that's probably the wrong way to go.
The other thing you can do, though, is read outside of your sphere, right? So the other place that really good ideas come from is from reading things that are in related industries or adjacent businesses, right? So that's why I read your stuff, for example. Like, I'm not trying to be a speaker coach, right? I'm trying to be, a writer and an editor, but we're both talking about ideas. We're both talking about ideas and how to get them out into the world, but not in the same channels.
All right. I like that. Thank you. And thank you for listening and reading. Let's talk about how to develop a truly differentiated position for yourself as a thought leader. I mean, we talked about that layer of really finding your own voice. Have we covered that off, or is there more to that?
I mean, I think for me, that is the main part of it, is just making sure that what you're doing is really unique. I think if I could add anything else to that, and I think it's also owning your voice. I think one of the things people, aside from the copying, which again, I've said this already, it's like, I think that's it's a dangerous path for people to go down. Mm-hmm. It's really, the story is always in the specificity, right? Yeah. So get into the details. It's one thing to say broadly, empathy is really important. It's like, don't do that. Don't give me a blog post about how empathy is important. Mm-hmm. Tell me a story about how empathy changed your life.
So being a master storyteller that you are, you've given us one really good key, and that is about the key being specificity. specificity, easy for me to say.
The worst word, right?
What are some other things that we as non-writers, okay, so many of us have authored books. I've got 4 books that I've written, but I wouldn't consider myself a writer. So what are a couple of more kind of writer's tips that we may not naturally come by, that they're just a part of your world every day?
Okay, so I'm going to stop you for 1 minute, though. So writers, first of all, writers are people who write. Okay, they're not a class of mythical people. So the way you become a writer is you write, right?
All
It is
right.
not. This is not there are writers over here and there are non-writers. If you write, you're a writer. So every day that you get up and you
Thank you.
take the trouble of putting your thoughts together and sharing them with the world, you are a writer.
I'm going to claim that for myself. Thank you very much, Mary Ellen. Thank you. I am a writer. Thank you.
Absolutely. I've never anybody tells me they wrote 4 books. They're not a writer.
Not really a writer. I'm an author, not a writer. You know what? I heard somebody say that 30 years ago, and it just stuck.
Well,
so
I disagree. I think
I'm not as
totally
good at it. I don't think I'm as good as you are. So, okay, give me a few more tips that might help people.
Okay, start with what you want to say, like with your audience in mind. So I think another thing that will trip people up is they will sit down and they will think I just have to start writing. But structure is very important to me as a writer and an editor. So I sit down and I think about, what is the thesis? Like, what is the main takeaway? If someone is going to like listen to this or read this, like, what do I want them to remember
What's the
from
point?
what they're reading?
Okay, good.
And so you come up with that idea and then you build out a structure that supports that argument. And you'll notice what I haven't had you start doing yet is writing a bunch of words, right? Like you will go through the process of what's my point? That's a sentence. There's some bullet points.
Right.
When that feels good, when that feels right, when you've got the bones, then you start writing.
Okay. I like
Only then. And you can think about that when you're in that stage. Sometimes that stage for me is 90% of the time of writing. I mean, I think sometimes what messes people up sometimes is they conflate the thinking and the writing.
Gotcha. And the thinking tiring. Is the heavy lifting.
The thinking, what you're actually doing is thinking and putting it on paper.
I like that a lot. And so really having kind of your main theme and then having however many points, we joke in this industry about 3 points in a poem. That's not really how it goes anymore. But for a while there were a lot of speakers doing that from the platform, 3 points in a poem. Anyway, think about what your 3 or whatever, however many points are going to be. And do you think that people can only digest kind of more bite-sized pieces now? Like, are we reading as long of articles as we used to?
Actually, the best performing articles are longer than they ever have been.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, how many words?
This has changed. So I'm going to walk you through it, because here's what I believe in. It's not so much about, you get so many words. It's like match the number of words, or the length or the time it takes to consume it with the gravity of the idea, right? So we all joke sometimes, like somebody will come to me and say, I want to write a white paper on a topic, and they'll tell me what the topic is. And I'm like, that sounds like a blog post.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I got you.
If it's something that someone could sit down and read, and you're just introducing an idea in a light way, and they could read it in 3 minutes, like if they could digest it, right? If in one sitting, that's a blog post. If it only takes 3 minutes to understand what you're talking about, go for those 500 words.
Gotcha. Right?
Keep it at that. If it's something that needs a little more backup, if you want to go really deep on something, if either it's a big idea or it's like really provocative and you need to back it up like big time, then you can go long. Then you can start stretching into that 1,500 words. Like 1,500 words is the length that actually we are finding right now performs the best.
Interesting. I love that you are, just really deep in the analytics of this. So, and that kind of leads us to different marketing channels. You probably spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, do you?
I do. So I also believe, just like I believe in matching the length to the quality of the idea, like the appropriateness of it and the audience, the same thing for channels. Like I look at channels, the questions I ask myself are, well, what do I want to say? Who do I want to say it to? Right. And then how am I going to get it in front of them? Okay. So when I'm deciding what channel I ask, if it's okay, I want to
Where
talk to
are
my
they? Yep.
right, where are they hanging out? And if it's something, okay, I want to write something and it's for my existing audience, I'm going to go to my email list if that's who it's really for.
Sure.
If I want to use this content to get found by new people that have never heard of me, I'm going to write it on my blog or write it on LinkedIn Publisher, and put it out, on Facebook or something, right? Like you want to match the channel. Like the social channels are really good for getting you in front of people who have never heard of you.
Yes.
Your own channels allow you to achieve a deeper sense of connection to your existing audience.
And what do you think about double dipping? Because it feels like a waste when you've taken this time to write this beautiful piece that you don't share it everywhere. But that's not really appropriate, is it?
No, it's, what you can do is you've got an idea, right? You have what you actually want to share. If people, they think about the deliverable, they think about the asset, they think I wrote a blog post, but the blog post is not the thing that is at the center of this. What's there is the idea that you wanted to communicate.
Right.
And so if you can do a version of it, let's say the idea gets communicated in the blog, and then you flip over and you make a 2-minute video that also communicates that idea, and you can embed it in the blog. You can then take the blog and post it on Facebook, but hopefully the teaser copy that you write for that broad audience on Facebook is different from the teaser copy you write for your newsletter, who are your biggest fans. Right. One has to introduce me. The other one assumes that we know each other, and we're going to go a little deeper.
That's true. That's a really different form of writing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay, that's really good. So, any other channels that we haven't discussed that people should be considering for their writing? I mean, they can really go industry specific and go into whatever the publications are in those industries.
I would say always look at, depending on your goals, like for your business and where you are, I would say think of it in these buckets. That you've got channels that you own, right? So you own your blog, you own your email newsletter subscriber base, right? You've got earned channels where other people talk about you. Like that's PR. You'd say classic PR, or on social when people organically talk about you, that kind of word of mouth.
Okay.
And then you've got paid, where you pay to amplify your message. And I think in this conversation so far, we've mostly talked about the owned part and the earned.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also important. I guess I would say I would be negligent if I didn't tell you that if you want to get your content in front of new people, and even frankly your existing audience, you should probably budget for paid promotion.
Yeah, talk about that. What are your clients? What's your minimum, and what are some things that people just aren't doing that they probably should be doing when it comes to paid advertising?
I would just say think about distribution. They put as much effort into your distribution plan, whether it involves paid or organically promoting it, as you did in the creation, right? So you're going to put all this work into like polishing this blog post or making this video or writing a white paper or ebook. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of energy that goes into creating those things, whether you do it yourself or you do it with a partner.
Okay.
It's going to be a lot of work. So no matter how beautiful it is, you can't just drop it on your website and go, all right, guys, enjoy. Right?
Yeah, I'm done.
Right. So go back and think about that audience question of who you want to get and where they are, and then take that information and like use that to pick your channels, run some tests. I think the most common channels that I use these days for content promotion for targeted stuff is we use Facebook.
Right.
Their ad platform.
Facebook ads, yep.
LinkedIn. We use LinkedIn's content marketing tools. Those are getting better and better every day. Like if you had asked me a year ago, I would have said paid Facebook over LinkedIn every time. That is not as true anymore.
They're coming on strong at LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then I would say Twitter as well, especially for a speaker. If you are going to go, this is one of my favorite little tricks for speakers. If you're going to speak somewhere, and you've got a keynote that you're giving, right? And if it's a big enough conference to have a hashtag and to have like a conversation going.
Get in on the hashtag.
Yeah. Yes. You should be like, as soon as they start going, you should start going. Yeah. And most likely, if you're doing your content right, it supports your keynotes. Yeah. So go grab a few of your blog posts or something. Hopefully you've got something in your library. You should think of your content like a library. They're not, I just write it and it disappears and I never think about it again. Go pluck a few things out, the really good things. One good thing is better than 10, crappy things. Like put that one good thing. Yeah. And then put a little paid promotion so that you show up whenever people It helps people get
Ooh.
excited. It's actually a really
Ah,
nice teaser thing. It helps people get excited about your
I
presentation.
just got a ding, ding, ding moment. I definitely would have thought of getting in on the hashtag, but I wouldn't have thought of putting a paid ad on it. That's a ding, ding, ding. That's a really great idea. I love it. You're going to be there, and hopefully, you're on the main stage. And
Mhm.
so, and people need to hear about you how many times before they really go, this person does this. Now I know, right? It takes a lot of different directions to really get noticed by people. And this
Mhm.
adding to that mix to such a degree, I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, you'd be amazed at what you can get for $50, right? At some of these smaller conferences, just to
Yeah.
make sure that people see you, and it'll show up as sponsored. But if you do the copyright, again, you're not
It won't
forcing
feel
anything.
like an ad. It'll be say, hey, here's
No.
something for free. I love
Yeah.
that. That's a really good ding, ding, ding. I love that. Thank you so much. All right. What's another thing that people should be thinking about in terms of, let me ask you this. Let's talk about video for a minute.
Mhm.
Speakers, people want to see you speaking. I know when we talk demos, we're very specific that people, if I'm going to hire you to speak, I want to see you speaking live. Okay, so that's
Mhm.
one thing. We're going to check that off and put it aside. But what about social media and becoming a thought leader using video? What have you seen some of your clients do well?
So my clients or not, I would say one of the things, you're right that it's not about the speaker videos. The speaker videos will only get you so far. And if you're at the point, if you're sending, if your goal, right, so it comes back to business goals. If your goal is to prove that you are qualified to speak, right, then, and you're targeting your content at people who book speakers, by all means, show me clips of you speaking. Right,
Okay.
like that, those people will be convinced. If your goal is to build up your broader audience for your content and build up your reputation as a thought leader and build connections, like for people, say, for example, a lot of speakers also want to write books and they're trying to build up their email list and they're trying to build up their audience so that they can do other things for them, just for like regular people, building up your fan base. For those, the speaker videos are not where it's at. That's actually not what people want to see.
Mm-hmm.
What you can do there are very, very simple direct to camera
Mm-hmm.
videos.
Yeah.
Like,
Which sit at your
it's
desk if you have
sit
to,
at your
right?
desk, get
Yeah.
in a good environment in your garage.
Yeah.
And really in many cases, sometimes they're just like short versions of the same stories you tell in your keynotes. Practice those. They're a little weird. It's a little weird to do it, especially if you're a speaker and you really feed off the energy of the crowd. It can
Mm-hmm.
feel very strange. But to get up there and have an audience of no one, or an audience of one, whoever's running your camera.
Right.
But it doesn't take much, like not for social video. This is not one where you should invest like a ton of money in this. Like get a decent camera. Honestly, you can do some of this on an iPhone. Like if if you're very entry level, just go ahead and grab the iPhone, and then put some money into a little bit of light editing on the back end of it.
There's actually a little circular light that you can hook right onto your iPhone that you can get on Amazon inexpensively as well. So there's lots of ways to make that work. Love it. Thank you so much. You've been giving us so many good ideas. If people would like to know more about your company and what you do, Mary Ellen, what should they do?
Come on over and check out at repcapitalmedia.com. I think they might find that pretty interesting, but I think really probably more of your audience might like our brand magazine called Managing Editor. It's, I think you mentioned in my bio that I was the publisher of Managing Editor. And that is a magazine that we launched last year, actually right at a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
We decided to kill our agency blog. Right. So everyone's blogging, right? So
Right.
sometimes
And you're like, wait a second, we're not going to blog.
Right.
We're going to launch a magazine.
Right. Well, we had been blogging, and then a part of our business is we launched these branded magazines for people. And so we launched this magazine. We decided, well, we actually were working with a consultant, and I sometimes look back on this. This is why you always get outside perspective,
Yes.
Even about your own work. And you say, okay, well, what could we do differently? We're really bored with the blog. And he said, well, why don't you kill it and launch a magazine? Didn't you make like a dozen of these for other people last year?
Yeah.
Like, oh gosh, you're right. And so we went out and we were like, what kind of content would we want it to be? What would we like the focus to be? And we launched this magazine, and everything about it has been awesome. Like, it's given us great reason to connect here's a way to think about it, especially, and I think this is important as your listeners think about their content too. If I approach someone at this point, in 2018, going into 2019, and I say, can I interview you for my blog? Okay, right. I'll do it if I'm your friend. Like, it's fine.
Right.
If I come to you and I say, hey, I've got a magazine and it's called Managing Editor Magazine, and we highlight thought leaders in our industry, could I interview you? It's a different level of response.
Yeah, serious.
We found we were able to take an astronomical leap in the quality of the people we could interview you. Like, I'm not going to call out the brands. You guys go check it out. You can, but it was really crazy. Like, we've been absolutely delighted at the people who are willing to talk to us.
Awesome.
For a magazine. They're not going to talk to me for my blog.
So we will put a link in the show notes. What's the best link that we should give for the magazine?
Oh, managingeditor.com.
Okay,
managingeditor.com.
All right. Well, Mary Ellen Slayter, thank you so much for being on the show today. We most appreciate it.
And thank you for having me.
Thrilled that you were here. And if you are listening on iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher, please make sure that you subscribe and leave us a rating, leave us a comments. We'd really love to get our ratings and our comments up a little bit higher. So thank you for listening, everyone. And with that, we'll say, see you soon, Wealthy Speakers. Bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speakers Show. Please visit speakerlauncher.com for your free Wealthy Speaker audit, and visit speakerlauncher.com/podcast for show notes and many more resources to help you catapult your speaking business. See you soon, Wealthy Speakers.